The day Marcus Hale decided to return the package, he thought it would be the most ordinary choice he'd make all week. He had no idea that by sunset, his quiet, struggling life as a single father would collide with a truth so heavy it would leave him standing speechless in the doorway of a glass mansion overlooking the cold Atlantic coast. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unexpected grace, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even the smallest decisions can change everything. Marcus lived in a modest apartment in Portland, Maine, where the winters were long and the heating bills unforgiving. His world revolved around his 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, whose laughter was the only bright color in an otherwise gray routine. 2 years earlier, Marcus had buried his wife after a sudden illness that left him widowed before he even understood what goodbye meant. Since then, life had become a careful balancing act between grief, fatherhood, and survival. He worked as a warehouse supervisor for a logistics company that shipped high-end corporate merchandise. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid just enough to keep Sophie in warm coats and school lunches. Marcus had learned to live with exhaustion. What he hadn't learned was how to quiet the loneliness that crept in when Sophie fell asleep and the apartment went silent. The package arrived on a Thursday morning. Sleek, carefully wrapped, labeled for a high-profile recipient, Victoria Langford, CEO of Langford Biotech, one of the fastest-growing pharmaceutical companies in the country. The warehouse buzzed when her name appeared on the manifest. She was the kind of executive who appeared on business magazine covers, sharp-eyed and unstoppable. But something was wrong. The address was outdated, the delivery system flagged it, and the package was set aside for rerouting. Marcus noticed it near the end of his shift, sitting alone on the metal table like it didn't belong. Company policy required it to be sent back to the distribution center, but the updated address popped up in the internal system, an oceanfront estate just outside the city. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, Marcus volunteered to deliver it personally after work. Maybe it was the overtime pay, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the need to feel useful beyond the narrow walls of his routine. That evening, with Sophie staying at his neighbor's apartment, Marcus drove his aging sedan along the coastal highway. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with orange and violet streaks that reflected off the water. The Langford estate came into view. Modern architecture, glass walls, steel gates. It looked less like a home and more like a statement. Marcus felt out of place as soon as the gates slid open after he buzzed the intercom. Gravel crunched under his tires. The ocean roared softly beyond the cliffs. He stepped out, holding the package against his chest, suddenly aware of his worn boots and faded jacket. The front door opened before he could knock. Victoria Langford stood there barefoot, her usually immaculate public image stripped down to something almost fragile. She wasn't dressed in power suits or heels. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, her dark hair pulled back loosely. But that wasn't what made Marcus freeze. It was the look on her face. She looked like someone who had been crying for hours. For a brief moment, the world seemed to narrow to the space between them. The powerful CEO and the tired single dad. Marcus handed her the package, offering a polite explanation about the delivery error. He expected a nod, perhaps a distracted thank you. Instead, her fingers trembled as she took it. She didn't open it right away. She just stared at the label, her jaw tightening. Marcus sensed he should leave, but something held him there, a silent gravity pulling him into a moment that wasn't meant for strangers. The wind off the ocean whipped against the house, and Victoria stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in, perhaps out of courtesy, perhaps out of something deeper. Marcus hesitated only a second before stepping inside. The interior was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking endless water, minimalist decor, art pieces that probably cost more than his annual salary. But the beauty felt hollow. The house was too quiet. On the dining table sat a framed photograph of a teenage boy with Victoria's sharp eyes and gentle smile. Fresh flowers surrounded it. Marcus understood before she said a word. The package, she explained in a voice that barely held steady, had been shipped from a research hospital in Boston. It contained her son's final personal belongings, items he'd kept in his hospital room during his battle with a rare autoimmune disease. She had been in Europe negotiating a merger when his condition worsened. By the time she landed back in the United States, he was gone. The CEO who commanded boardrooms had not been in the room when her son took his last breath. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Grief recognized grief. He didn't need the details. He knew the hollow sound of regret. He remembered the hospital corridors, the sterile smell, the way time seemed cruelly indifferent. Victoria sank into a chair, the package still unopened on her lap. All the headlines, all the interviews, all the polished success meant nothing in that moment. She was simply a mother who had missed the final goodbye. Marcus didn't offer empty platitudes. He told her, quietly, about his wife, about Sophie asking why heaven needed her mom more than she did. He spoke about the guilt he carried for not catching the illness sooner, for not somehow being strong enough to stop the inevitable. The room felt less cold as their stories intertwined. Victoria finally opened the package. Inside were a worn hoodie, a paperback novel with folded pages, and a small sketchbook filled with drawings of ocean waves. On the last page, her son had drawn the very cliffside view outside the window with the words, "Home feels peaceful." Victoria broke, and Marcus, unsure of protocol or status, did the only human thing he could think of. He stayed. He stood beside her, not as an employee or a stranger, but as someone who understood the unbearable weight of loving someone you can no longer hold. Hours passed unnoticed. The sky outside turned dark, the ocean now a black mirror under moonlight. Victoria confessed that she had built her empire to give her son security, treatments, opportunities. In chasing the future, she had missed the present. Marcus thought about the nights he almost accepted double shifts instead of attending Sophie's school recital. He thought about how close he had come to becoming absent in his own child's memories. Sometimes it takes standing in someone else's mansion to realize what truly matters in your own small apartment. Before Marcus left, Victoria did something unexpected. She asked about Sophie, her age, her dreams, her favorite color. And when Marcus mentioned how Sophie loved drawing but couldn't afford art classes, something shifted in Victoria's expression. Grief, when it softens, sometimes becomes generosity. Weeks later, Marcus received a call from Langford Biotech's corporate office. Victoria had established a foundation in her son's name to fund creative programs for children who had lost a parent. Sophie was among the first scholarship recipients. Art classes, mentorship, even a small college fund had been arranged. Marcus was stunned, but that wasn't all. Victoria offered Marcus a position within the foundation's logistics division. Better hours, higher pay, and most importantly, flexibility to be present for his daughter. She told him that returning the package instead of letting it disappear in a system had reminded her that integrity still existed in quiet corners of the world. Life did not transform overnight into perfection. Marcus still had hard days. Victoria still carried an ache that would never fully disappear. But something new had taken root between them. Not romance born of fantasy, but a friendship forged in shared sorrow and mutual respect. The single dad who had felt invisible now walked into work knowing he was building something meaningful. The CEO who had lost everything that mattered most found purpose in honoring her son's memory through children like Sophie. One evening, months later, Marcus stood again on that cliffside terrace, watching Sophie laugh as she showed Victoria her latest sketch of the ocean. The wind felt less harsh. The house no longer seemed hollow. Sometimes the package we think we're delivering to someone else is actually meant to open something inside us. If this story has touched your heart so far, please comment "Second chances are real" below. Your words might inspire someone else who's struggling to keep going. As the sun set over the Atlantic, Marcus realized he had almost declined that extra delivery. He had almost let policy replace compassion. Instead, a simple act of responsibility had led him to healing he didn't know he needed. Victoria never regained the years she lost with her son. Marcus never stopped missing his wife. But together, in their shared humanity, they built something stronger than regret, a legacy of presence, kindness, and second chances. And as Sophie's laughter echoed against the glass walls, Marcus understood that sometimes life doesn't reward us with what we expect. It surprises us with what we truly need. If this story moved you even a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell us in the comments who you would return the package for. Who in your life deserves one more act of kindness? Because somewhere out there, one small decision is waiting to change everything.